All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us today, Miss Gatson. We appreciate you being here with us. Um, you want to do a quick, well, you know what? I'm not sure what you have for us, so I'm just going to hand the floor over to you.
Well, I appreciate that. And uh, I also appreciate your inviting me to be a part of this class today. And it's wonderful to see you all. You're just representatives of a bright future for for us all. I am Renee Gaston, as Professor Wright said, and I, by profession, am a human capital management consultant. Basically, what that means is that I help organizations, both for-profit and nonprofit, to bring out the best in their people, primarily through helping them to make smart decisions about how they recruit people, how they develop leaders, and how they plan their workforce. I've been in this field for 35 years, and I've had a chance to work with great companies like Wells Fargo, Charles Schwab, Kaiser Permanente, and have really approached my work as like a ministry. I've shared this with Dr. Wright previously, in focusing on not only hiring and retention strategies, but also helping organizations to value diversity and also women, which you can appreciate being a class of women. Before that, I spent time as a marketing director with both Hewlett Packard and Target, and in admissions with the Stanford Graduate Business School, of which my husband is an alum. I'm an alum of the Berkeley Business School, which is an interesting story since they are rivals on the football turf. But I've also taught as an adjunct professor for a few years. And personally, outside of work, I enjoy mentoring students and supporting nonprofit organizations, especially those that help young people, families, and seniors. Most importantly, for the reason that I'm honored to have the opportunity to chat with you today is that my husband and I are also parents through adoption. And this is the most rewarding part of our lives. And with that, we have been honored and privileged to become adoptive parents through the domestic adoption process, and to adopt newborns who are here already in this country. So that is the process that I'd like to talk with you about today. I'm not as familiar with the international adoption process. So, that might be something that you also could explore with another speaker or delve into yourselves. But some of you may be adopted. If you are adopted or have family members or friends who are, then you know that adoption is one of the many ways that families come together. And I want to impress upon you the many steps that are involved in the adoption process, from placement through to an adoption being finalized. And I thought I would begin by personalizing the process, and throughout, I'll share anecdotes with you about our experiences through this process And the photo that you see here was taken 10 years ago.
Wow.
Our oldest son was 8, and our youngest son was 4 years old at the time. Now, our oldest son, who's pictured with his arm around me, is 6'3" and our youngest, who is 14, is 6'1". I have not grown, so I'm still height challenged at a little over 5 feet. And my husband and I have been married for 40 years. Our journey to adoption really was rooted in the fact that for the first 12 years of our marriage, we spent it obtaining our MBAs, growing our careers, purchasing a house in California, which is even then was expensive. It's more so now, but that was quite an accomplishment. And then we didn't know that we would become involved in caring for our elders, both his great aunt and my dad were diagnosed with Alzheimer's relatively close in time to each other. And so we took on the responsibilities for their care through to the point of their passings. And so that was all encompassing. We looked up and 10 years had passed. And when I went to my OBGYN, I learned that my eggs had shrank from the size of walnuts to peanuts. I was 40 years old, and my husband and I thought about how difficult it would be for me to conceive. And we decided that instead of trying to have our own biological children, that we would adopt. And am I saying the name correct, Avery? If you
Yes.
wouldn't mind moving to the next slide, then I can talk more about the adoption process. And also let me share that my husband and I, ironically, were both only children. And because of that, we knew from the onset in starting to expand our family through adoption that we would ideally like to adopt more than one child. And so I'd like to begin talking with you about the adoption process to define some key terms, like what is an adoption? And it's important to know, it may seem intuitive, but it is a legal process. Unlike when my parents were young and, let's say an uncle or aunt just couldn't care for their child, they would just hand them off to a family member or another responsible family in the community. But since then, it's become a legal process that transfers parental rights from biological parents to adoptive parents. Now, my husband's focus was that we wanted to adopt newborns and provide newborn babies with a permanent and loving home. Why did we want newborns? We wanted to imprint our children from birth. It was a personal choice, and we were indifferent to gender, and we just wanted healthy babies. We just wanted to try to replicate a family that we might have had if we had been able to, I had been able to conceive. And as you may know, adoptions may be private or public. I'll talk about those terms more in depth and define them more as we go along. But both of our adoptions were private, and it took us 10 years to become adoptive parents. So we started, I was age 40. So that lets you know I was age 50 when I became a first-time mom, which is why I proudly wear a gold pendant that says mom. Uh, those 10 years meant that we went through 6 unsuccessful matches with birth mothers who were expecting and decided after their babies were born, which is the only time that they can legally make their decision, one that would stick, they decided to keep their babies. I can tell you, young ladies, that that is like miscarrying 6 times. You set up the nursery, you buy all the things, you get mentally and emotionally rooted in becoming a parent, and then the rug is pulled out from under you. So it takes, we're only human. It takes time to rebound and to want to try again. So that is what took 10 years after 6 times of going through those experiences. But I will say, because joy is a part of what it is that you are learning about in the whole aspect of mothering, is just as a biological mother forgets about her labor pains when she holds her newborn, I can assure you, my husband and I have transcended the pains of the adoption process, and we've been experiencing the joys of parenting. And they're just like any other parent's joys, in that, you get to experience your child's first words. You're teaching them to walk, simple things like how to whistle, things that you wouldn't even think about as being momentous occasions until you become a parent, like teaching them how to blow bubbles with chewing gum because they're so ecstatic that they can do it. Ride bikes, skateboards, teaching them to swim. And I thought about this because we ensured that our boys had the ability to survive in any depth of water. Then you think, oh my goodness, we're the worst parents that there are when you're witnessing them diving off of high dives or jumping off of cliffs on vacation. Like, okay, I didn't sign up for this. But the other thing is that you, as I'll say, mature parents, we were also able to be there, well, not so much for the younger yet, but the older, to support him through his first love and heartbreak. It's a holistic experience. And let's see now, if Avery, you could take me to the next slide, that would be great. Thank you. And it should say, oh, I see, you are on the next slide, aren't you, dear? Bear with me. So I want to also let you know, as you probably already do, there are 2 different types of adoption: private versus public. The private adoption, which is what we have been involved in, is facilitated by an agency or by an attorney. We have experienced both. Our first adoption was through an adoption agency. Our second was with a private attorney, because we became aware of our second son's birth mother through our social network. So the birth mother and us as prospective adoptive parents had already chosen each other. We just needed an intermediary to close the deal, if you will.
Mm.
This is the most common process of private adoption for newborns.
Mm.
Now, I would be remiss if I didn't point out, we all know we live in a capitalistic society. What was eye-opening to me was just how much the adoption process mirrors the society that we live in that every intermediary gets paid well.
Wow.
Agencies, adoption facilitators, social workers, psychologists, attorneys. We spent in 10 years $100,000. Do you know what that could have done for us to be able to use those resources for our sons?
Yeah, yeah. Mm.
But that's not the world we live in. So I just want you to know if you encounter people who have chosen adoption, what it means if they say private. But you can't put a price tag on love. That's my philosophy, and you really can't. I would do it again.
Mm.
Now, in terms of public adoption, that's foster care, managed by state agencies, and foster parents get paid by the state to foster, usually older children. It's less common for newborns to be in foster care.
Mm.
What I want to emphasize and what was important for my husband and I is that with either type of adoption, that adoptive parents share openly and honestly with their children that they're adopted and as much of their origin story as the adoptive parents know, because this gives it gives your child a full understanding of their identity as they grow. And that's so important.
Mm.
Our boys would probably tell you that we overshared. We began before they even knew anything. They were probably a few months old, that they were adopted, that they were placed out of love, that their birth parents had not disassociated with them. And who, as much as we knew about their biological parents and siblings. So if you could go to the next slide, that brings me to some key terms. We're talking about a very, how do I say, very important, crucial family process that involves real human beings. There's a birth mother and birth father. Those are the biological parents. Our sons have different birth families. These sheroes and heroes voluntarily place a child for adoption, which is the most selfless and generous thing that any human being could possibly do. And as adoptive parents, my husband and I are eternally grateful to the biological mothers and fathers who made us parents. And the definition of an adoptive parent were individuals who were approved to adopt, and it's a lengthy process. Part of the process is a home study. You may have heard of those. They're in-depth evaluations of the adoptive parents. And that means that social workers come to your home multiple times. They inspect your house from top to bottom. do your cabinets have locks on them? Are poisonous chemicals out of reach of children? Uh, are there covers on your outlets? They interview each prospective parent individually. They interview you as a couple. If you have other people living in your house, like a grandparent or whomever, those people will be interviewed. You will be background checked. You will be fingerprinted, uh, and evaluated in a way that biological parents never are. Um, I just feel that having gone through this process, I wish that everyone had to be as strenuously evaluated before being able to become a parent.
Mhm, mhm. That would be something that would bring a whole different type of world.
Amen. We might be in a different place than we are now. That's all I'll say about that. Um, Now, then there is what the next logical question that someone may have. Well, then how does a birth parent relinquish their parental rights? And that's known as a legal surrender. So literally, a birth mother or father, well, birth mother and father must relinquish their parental rights in order for the adoption to move on to the point of finalization. Now, usually that means that they're literally signing a relinquishment contract. To use our adoption processes as examples, neither of the birth fathers could be found with through hiring detectives, um, attorney outreach, and the like. So by default, their parental rights were relinquished because they didn't respond to outreach or to public announcements about the adoption proceedings. Now, with all of kind of those particulars being explained, then you get to really what begins to be the fun part, which is the finalization. And that is court approval of the adoption. But that is, I will tell you, a party. It's a joyous event. Adoptive parents, we were able to invite close family and friends. It can be, say, up to, this isn't hard and fast, but say like a half a dozen people, because it's being held in either a small courtroom or a judge's chamber. And the judge, with with you and your loved ones present, reviews your adoption history and ensures that all the paperwork is properly completed, and then approves the adoption. In the case of our second son, I want to share a little aside with you because it's just the most heartwarming experience that I've had, one of the most heartwarming experiences I've had in my life, in that let's see now, our sons are, so our oldest son at the time was 5, and our youngest son was a year old when his finalization hearing was taking place. So there we all were in the judge's courtroom, and the judge put his robe on our oldest son, gave him his gavel, and picked him up and put him in his chair and allowed him to pretend like he was holding court for a bit. And that was an experience that our oldest son will never forget. It was just, we were just all so giddy, and it was just such a great thing for a judge to do. And you could tell he was having fun. I think he was also kind of forestalling taking on the next case because it was a criminal trial. So
Wow. That is so sweet. I have never heard about this. I've not heard anything about this. This is so personal. Thank you for sharing. Oh my
A-
goodness.
Absolutely, happy to do so. So now, if we could go to the next slide, I want to also share another aspect of joy. And let me say this as well. Adoption and being chosen, because I believe that I was divinely chosen to parent through this process, uh, has opened me to aspects of love that I would never have dreamed possible.
Mm.
So there are open and there are closed adoptions. When we first started the adoption process, I was adamant that we would have closed adoptions. I was fearful that birth parents would want to somehow come and uh, undo the adoptions.
Mhm.
First of all, that's not likely. It's illegal. And so it was an unfounded fear. As I went through the adoption process and learned about the importance of an adoptive child to know the full extent of their identity, to be aware of who their birth families are to the extent possible, I became a fan of open adoption.
Mm.
But I do, as with anything else in life, believe that one should have choice and that there's no value judgment placed on either type of adoption. With an open adoption, it allows contact with the biological family and information to be exchanged. Both of our boys have their biological mother's phone numbers in their mobile phones, and they've talked with them. They've had video uh, calls with them, and and we share photos constantly. But after a child, we actually have open adoption agreements with our birth mothers, but they both stipulated that after about the age of 10, basically when our sons became adolescents, that they could make their own decisions about how much or how little contact they wanted. And children are different. So our oldest son has basically said, mm, DNA doesn't determine who my family is. My family is my family of choice, and it's a matter of spirit for him.
Mm.
For our youngest son, he embraces both. He has a lot of contact with his biological mom and his biological siblings, uh,
Mm.
and he also honors us as his adoptive family. And it's just a lot of fun. It's
Mm.
it's it makes me as a parent feel secure in knowing that both of our sons are aware, especially in their adolescence, which is a awkward time in terms of coming into one's own in terms of your identity. They're fully aware that they're loved
Mm.
by both their biological and their adoptive families. And I can't think of a better foundation
Mm.
uh, for a young person. So if we can go to the next slide, please. Thank you. So the role of the adoption agency we kind of touched on is to screen and to approve adoptive parents. They provide counseling and support to both birth families and also the adoptive family. They handle legal paperwork, and what's also important is they coordinate with the hospital where the birth mother is going to deliver, so that the hospital staff are informed of that the newborn is being adopted and of the identities of both the birth parents and the adoptive family.
Wow.
And they also ensure that everyone is in compliance with state laws. We can go to the next slide. And so in that counseling and support for our sheroes and heroes, our birth parents, it's important for them to get emotional support during and after the pregnancy. With open adoptions, my husband and I developed close relationships with our birth mothers as they were expecting and, up through labor and delivery and beyond. But the agencies and or attorneys also educate each side about adoption rights, and they provide confidential counseling sessions to birth parents so that they can make informed voluntary decisions. Mm. This is key. So all of our birth mothers, we insisted, but first of all, they legally had to, but we also insisted that they have counseling, and we were more than willing to pay for it. Mm. Why is this important? Case in point, our first birth mother decided to keep her son after he was born because we encouraged her to. And you're saying, like, really? She was ready to place with you. You could have been done, right? No, because she had been kicked out of the house by her parents when she became pregnant. They wanted her to have an abortion. Mm. And she wanted to carry to term. Yeah. And we said, we will not, in good conscience, you cannot place your baby with us. We cannot, in good conscience, have this child because your family doesn't even know that he's been born. Mm. So we encouraged her to reach out to her mother, who was a nurse, by the way, and her father, a doctor. They're a well-known family because one of her uncles is a well-known author, African-American author. Mm. And she reached out to her mom, who was ecstatic to hear from her. But beyond that, her father had been diagnosed with pancreatic cancer and didn't have long to live. Yeah, yeah. So needless to say, she kept her son and she named him after her father. Oh. Now, heartbreaking. I was a mess, but I was secure in knowing that the right set of circumstances had unfolded. Mm-hmm. So then we'll move on to the next slide, which we've talked somewhat about, but the pre-birth steps are the birth mother selects an adoptive family. That would be through an agency adoption, or sometimes it's through an attorney who may facilitate that. And then legal and hospital documents are prepared, and adoptive parents complete the home study that I talked about. Then we can go on now to what happens in the hospital and the birth process. So we can go to thank you, Avery. I tell you, you have the best and brightest students, and they've got the best professor.
You are too kind.
I am speaking the truth. So hospitals are notified of the adoption plan, and adoptive parents may attend the delivery. So I have been blessed to be in the labor and delivery room both times. Mm. And that's a great, I mean, you can't, what better bonding experience for me with the birth moms, right? It's just wonderful. And they were young women both. And so it was also an honor for me to be able to step in for their moms who opted not to be there.
Mm.
Um, there are differences in private adoptions with how you leave the hospital, believe it or not.
Mm.
If you are going through a private adoption through an agency, the birth mother must be wheeled in a wheelchair out of the hospital holding the baby, because at this point in a private adoption, the birth certificate has her name on it, and maybe the birth father if he's known, and she has not yet relinquished her parental rights. In an attorney private adoption, all of that legality has been taken care of before you leave the hospital. And as adoptive parents, we left with babe in arms.
Wow. Wow.
Now, in our case, because in our first adoption, our birth mother needed support. She had nowhere to go. Uh, we all just went to a hotel. We had our room, her room was next to ours, and she already had an 18-month-old who she was caring for. So that toddler was with her. And then we would take her to the adoption agency so that she could continue to get counseling, get support and caring for her child that was already here. And ultimately, within a week, she needed to decide whether she was going to relinquish her rights or not. And that was a roller coaster week for her emotionally, and needless to say for us. But we just wanted a win-win situation to come out of it for everyone, which it did. If we can go to the next slide. So this is a legal relinquishment of parental rights. The birth parent signs the consent forms. There's a state waiting period that the birth parent can waive, which was our case. And then the consent is, it says usually irrevocable once signed. And that's what I was alluding to previously, in that I didn't realize how kind of ironclad the adoption is, and that it was for naught that I was concerned about a closed or open adoption initially.
Mm.
Okay, hey, the next slide, please. Avery, I appreciate your help so much. Placement and post-placement supervision. Eureka! You get to take your baby home and you're busy counting their fingers and toes and just reveling in the fact that you're a parent and just can't believe how wonderful your life has become and how you have absolutely no control over your life after that. Because you realize that the child is the one who drives everything in your life from then on in a wonderful way. Social workers are not done with you yet, and they visit regularly for up to another half a year. In our case, we lived in California, which was highly regulated, as it still is. And so we had visits up to a year.
Wow.
And we had, to give you a case in point, we had decided not to cut our oldest son's hair because he was the one who was born in California, actually Hollywood. And we decided that we didn't want to cut his hair until he was at least a year old. And the social worker literally could find nothing to ding us on but the fact that we hadn't cut his hair.
Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. But that's so him, right? Like the fact that his hair wasn't cut, he was born in Hollywood, and I'm thinking about like his path and who he is now.
That is
It all
true.
goes together.
I hadn't thought about that. And what Professor Wright is referring to is the fact that our son is a freshman at Micah and he's a visual artist. And
Yeah,
right, and he
yeah,
embodies that,
yes, he
if,
does.
if you understand what I mean by that. So,
Oh,
but then reports are filed and everyone signs off on that the baby is adjusting fine. And I think like with any parent, for me, it was a sigh of relief once I reached that post 1 year milestone of being a parent because I said, oh, okay, at
mhm.
least the child has survived.
Oh my goodness. They won't know until they become parents what that feels like.
Exactly,
Oh my
exactly.
goodness.
And then if we can go to the next slide, thank you again, Avery. There, we've talked about the adoption finalization hearing, and that takes a while to go through the court system before the actual date is set. But then whenever that is, then you go and you revel in the process coming to fruition.
Mm,
And then if we can move to the next slide, Avery,
wow.
uh, then you may recall when we talk about post-adoption steps, I mentioned that initially when you leave the hospital, you leave with a birth certificate that has the birth family's information on it.
Mm,
But then what adoptive parents do is they apply to the state for an amended birth certificate. And then that birth certificate only has the adoptive parents as the parents.
mm,
And then you request your child's social security cards and numbers. And then in our case, having open adoptions, then we continue to maintain the expansion of our family by staying in touch with the birth families as well.
mm,
We invite, it's been through Zoom because our birth families they live far away. So, but we have them by, if you will, through Zoom for birthdays and
mm.
celebrations and share milestones like graduations with them through pictures and the like. And uh, I just can't say enough good things about how enhancing and rewarding
Mm,
adoption is.
mm,
And then the next slide is just a summary, which I'm sure you all can just mentally kind of do in your head because it's a logic process like any other. You begin by preparing and then you're matched. There's placement and then relinquishment of parental rights, finalization, and then the post-adoption documentation.
mm, mm,
And then finally, I did provide Professor Wright with a handout that summarizes all of these key points, but now you also have some shared life experience to breathe life into uh, all the different terms and all the different phases involved in an adoption process. And then also on that handout uh, are some resources that you can also refer to um, in your life as it is touched by adoption or as you touch others' lives who are a part of an adoption process.
Mm, mm, mm,
And with that, are there any questions?
mm, mm. Oh, you look gorgeous. I don't think I got to see your full face. It's like you
You
just
are
got on
so
screen.
funny.
You are. The blue is so beautiful.
Well, all I can say is praise God for filters.
Whatever, Renee. Hey, you're up, guys. What questions do you have?
It's a lot to take in.
Mhm.
And what I have shared, my goodness, at this point, it's been almost 20 years
Yeah.
of a lived experience. And
Mhm.
what I also didn't share is that we began our adoption process actually outside of the parameters of any of the adoption processes that I talked about, public or private, because at first we tried to adopt a family member's child.
Mhm.
So once my husband and I decided that we wanted to be adoptive parents, we openly shared that information with family and friends. And then one of my aunts said, Renee, because my parents are from Huntsville, Alabama,
Mhm.
Renee,
Mhm. Mhm.
you and Michael need to adopt
Mhm.
cousin's
Mhm.
unborn child.
Wow.
And I thought, okay, let me think about that.
Mhm.
But the more that Michael and I talked about it, we said, well, that could be wonderful
Mhm.
because we're able to help a family member.
Mhm.
And then our child
Yeah.
would be part of our family already.
Mhm.
And that would just be fantastic for everyone concerned. Well, that cousin, when the baby was born, decided that she wanted to parent her child.
Mhm.
And then, oh, I want to say within a year, she was expecting again.
Wow. Yeah.
And then she herself asked us if we would consider parenting that child. I was a little reluctant to go through this again, but I thought, okay, we visited Huntsville, we talked to her extensively, and I thought, "Well, this is going to happen." But yet again, she decided ultimately not to place. And so that is when,
Mhm.
after healing, after taking, I want to say about a year to heal,
Mhm.
that's when we registered with an adoption agency in San Francisco because we lived in the San Francisco Bay Area.
Mhm. Mhm.
So that was the start of a more traditional adoption journey, if you will.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. The heartbreak of like being prepared to adopt and this, like you said, 6 times. I cannot imagine,
Oh,
you know, the
it's
and then also like the memory of it, because I
yes.
know like I have an essay that I published And it took me years to write that essay
Yes.
about my miscarriage and like how
Ah,
that like sticks with you. But this
uh,
sounds like going through it 6 times and how it just comes up. You know, it's like a broom. And if you sweep a little bit or shake a rug, like the dust just comes up. I can't imagine like what a trigger might be. When
absolutely.
like, yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah, yeah.
No, you're correct. And even in preparation to share this information today with your wonderful class, I experienced
Mm,
some of some of that and had to sit with it,
mhm,
push it aside,
mhm.
and come back when I was ready.
Yeah,
Then pick the mantle back up and say, okay, okay, what's important? What do I want to share? What do I want to leave you, your students with?
yeah. Thank you. Thank you for even, you know, opening that door and going through that process. Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, our experiences ultimately are learning experiences, they touch us in a human way, but to the extent that others can benefit
Mhm.
from our experiences, that's what it's all about.
Yeah. Go ahead.
I have a question. Thank you for speaking. My name is Nia Boyd. I was interested to know if you and your husband ever looked into surrogacy, like when you were like looking at your options, like other than like giving birth alone. Well,
Yes, that is a great question. We actually did, and we ultimately decided that there are already so many women in situations where they were going to give birth
Mhm.
that how important was it for us? How important was DNA to us? And we ultimately decided that it wasn't it wasn't important that a child have our DNA, that parenting is a spiritual endeavor anyway. And so, we just decided not to. Now, we did look into it quite extensively to the extent that we learned that there are places in India where for under $10,000, one can have a surrogate,
Mm.
right? And it's also a complicated process, and we just didn't want to take on those complications. We just chose a different route.
Mhm.
That's an excellent question.
Mhm.
thank you.
Mhm.
Hello,
Hello.
my name is Erica, and thank you so much for speaking with us today. I really
Yeah.
like what you just said about parenting being a spiritual endeavor. So I was wondering if you could give like any advice to women that women that aren't able to physically give birth but desire to be mothers, how they can like embody that mothering of it being a spiritual journey and not so much a biological journey.
Mm, you have some thoughtful students. I love that. So I would say that's a great question, Erica, that it's a spiritual journey because if you're familiar with Khalil Gibran, and his book, The Prophet, and what he says about parenting is that our children come through us, but they are not ours. They are souls that we are, he doesn't say this, but this is me now. They are souls that we're privileged to guide to the extent possible. And for my husband and I, and something else that I didn't mention, I just realized this, that another requirement in California for becoming adoptive parents was actually taking a series of parenting classes and basically becoming certified to be a parent by learning what it's all about. And the upshot of those classes is that you always want to approach your child, no matter how old, from infancy on, through the lens that your relationship with them is more important than whatever the event is that's taking place. And also that you want to honor and respect them and their souls. I mean, we're all spiritual beings leading a human existence, right? And so, well, that's my philosophy. That's how I live my life. And because of that, then the best piece of advice I received was to approach and think about what it is that you're saying to your child as if they're your physician. Because we know that like our physician holds in their hands our health, our well-being, and potentially our mortality. So you're careful with how you navigate that relationship, right? And you just don't spout off what just springs to mind. You tailor it. And those are the things that I mean when I say that parenting is a spiritual endeavor. So it's work, but it's the most fun job you'll ever have.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Other questions, comments?
I had a question. Hi, my name is Perla, and thank you so much for speaking to our class today. I was very inspired by your adoption journey, and I kind of have maybe a general question, but after going through the adoption process and just being within it for many, many years, what do you think could be improved? Like if you had the power to like make a decision to change adoption in the United States, what do you think could be improved or changed?
That is another excellent thought-provoking question. I would take the profit motive out of it. And what I mean by that is that, quite honestly, my husband and I felt as if going through the process as if we were shopping for a used car. And I know that sounds horrible,
Mhm.
but I'm choosing that analogy purposely. And this is what I mean. We registered with an adoption agency. They presented us with two different opportunities, which we chose to decline. Usually the reasons that we would decline were because a birth mother may have disassociated with her pregnancy and may not have even had doctor's visits, and or there was some level of substance abuse. And so that's not what we wanted. There are adoptive parents who are fine with adopting potentially special needs children, quote unquote. We just felt like that was a bit much for us.
Mhm.
So what happens in the United States, and we learned this through experience, is that when you work with an agency, you have literally one, certainly no more than two times to turn down an opportunity and they stop working with you because they make their money on volume,
Mm.
placing, making matches, placing babies or children. They don't have to be newborns. That's how they make their money. And you can't blame them. They've got administrative overhead. I get it. But therefore, the reason we spent $100,000 in 10 years is because we had to continuously change intermediaries because if we turned down the situation that was brought to us, they dusted their hands of us.
Wow.
So therefore, I think all the checks and balances that are in place legally in the private adoption process are good, but I think that there should just be a public agency that prospective birth parents can go to uh, and that biological parents can go to and be matched.
Hmm. 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 That would be innovative.
Right.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, we can't even get universal health care, but that's what I
Right.
would like to
Yeah, yeah.
see.
The students are in the process of reimagining futures, so yeah. Thank you for that comment. Yeah, which is where I think Perla's question may be coming from. Yeah.
Wonderful.
Yeah, because we don't, in all of the classes and all of the years that I've taught, we've not really talked about adoption and motherhood. And so we are so grateful to have you here with us today. Are there any other questions? Like a question that somebody was raising? I had a question. Y'all are in the mud, by the way. I had a question. I don't know. I don't think you said this, so I'm not sure, and this is not something we've talked about before. I'm wondering how involved you were with prenatal appointments, and if you weren't, that's fine, but I'm wanting to know what your experience was like, because so many students in this room are interested in being OBGYNs, public health, being, public health, in the public health field in some way, shape, or form. I'm
Yes.
wondering what your experience was dealing with OBGYNs, if there were midwives or doulas or nurses and things like that in the room with you whenever you were as an adoptive parent.
That is a great question. I was so fortunate that I was with our first birth mother, able to attend her prenatal visits with her. I lived in the San Francisco Bay Area, North California. She was in LA. So I would just fly down and go with her. And it was her OBGYN that convinced her to place her unborn child for adoption because she knew that she wanted to carry to term. She knew that she already had 2 children. She was a young person. And she said, this is your best option in order to be able to provide this child with the type of life that you would want him to have. We have, because I've been involved with both birth mothers through their pregnancies and in the labor and delivery room, we have I'm blanking. Is it the ultrasounds? Yes. So we have the ultrasound pictures of our boys. They have those. So it's been like a real blessing because there's been no hiccup or gap for our boys. They have pictures of themselves in utero and, beyond. And so I will say the OBGYNs have been so supportive. Also, our second birth mother, so the biological mother for our youngest son, was living in the San Francisco Bay Area, but at that point we had moved to the greater DC area. And she came to live with us when she was 7.5 months pregnant. So I had to arrange through our pediatrician for her to have an OBGYN that would even accept her that late in her pregnancy. And trust me, she flew here like right at the nth time that she was even allowed to fly.
Yeah.
And so it's interesting that the OBGYN here, who was a cousin to our pediatrician, he was not, I'm going to just be blunt, he was not nice to her. He was, when he learned more about her history, he kind of admonished her for basically getting pregnant. And he was very kind to us, but he was very transactional with her.
Interesting.
Exactly. So I'm just being very transparent. Right. So I, to this day, don't understand what that was about, except I think that he probably considered himself giving her tough love.
Oh, interesting. Because I was leaning a little bit more to judgment.
Right. And they're not mutually exclusive, right?
Yeah, no, you're right. Yeah. That it's not kind, it's not fair,
Exactly.
right? Either way.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. I was taken aback. And, I wasn't, of course, in all of her sessions with him, but I mean, I was transporting her there. And, but I will say that in terms of when it came to labor and delivery, he was a sweetheart. So I don't know.
Oh, wow, okay. Well, we don't know then. My goodness. Well, if you could tell us, because we're going to be wrapping up here in about 5 minutes,
Absolutely.
what the greatest joys of motherhood have been.
You know, I received a little plaque from a cousin that said, anyone can become a mother, but it takes a special person to be called mommy.
Oh.
And so just having been entrusted with souls that call me mom, my identity is so-and-so's mom. That is the joy.
Yeah. Yeah.
That is the joy, is truly, there have been people who say, well, well, who's the real mom? Right?
Mm.
There's adoption bias, and
Yeah.
people don't really quite understand the terms and the process and the like.
Yeah.
And I tell you, just being able to be advocates for our sons, being able to provide them with a life that we know is quite different from what they would have had,
Yeah.
is such a reason for being.
Mm.
It gives me a purposeful life.
Mhm.
And I am so glad that my husband and I embarked on this journey.
Mhm. Mhm. Well, I am so glad that I have had an opportunity to get to know you and Michael and your children. They are wonderful, and it's beautiful. It's a beautiful experience just to know you all in general. But within the boundaries of this course, thank you, because you are blessing me today with knowledge that I have not learned in my life. It's an experience I haven't had. And I've grown and I've learned just from you sharing. And so I appreciate you ruffling those feathers, but also just opening the students. I don't know how much they know about adoption. Did you guys know a lot about adoption before? No, so you're learning today as well. Okay, okay.
Oh,
So
great.
yes,
Wonderful.
thank you so much.
You are so welcome. Thank you.
Mm, 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 mm.
Mm.